Hello again, this is Dr. Robert Kerr from the Inarah Research Institute in Saarbrücken in Germany, and we are continuing our conversation with Dr. Gerd Puin, formerly of the University of the Saarland here in Saarbrücken. In our last episode we discussed the find in 1972 of the sheaves, largely Quranic, on parchment and paper in the old mosque in Sana'a, and the development of the restoration project and how you became involved. And unlike rumors circulating on internet and other vague places, it is just like most academic projects start, that somebody is looking to get something done and you find people, and there's nothing all too mysterious about it. And the Yemenis understood the values, and at that time I suppose we were fortunate that they had just founded the Bureau of Antiquities, the Athar, and it got sent there. And your involvement in the first half of the 1980s in restoring the 10,000 parchment sheaves and leaving the paper alone. So the significant question is, after you sorted and restored and preserved the individual sheaves, there was some effort to identify codices, masahaf.
Okay. The problem was in that phase, and I think even in every phase of the project, that you could never oversee the whole amount of sheets, because we had a very huge table to pour out the bags with the manuscripts. This was one huge bag, and you could look at, say, 1,000 sheets. But then you had to sort them out and to position them in a special place with the 10-line manuscripts and the 12-line manuscripts and so on. And then came the next bag. So in a way, it was impossible to count them precisely, but where we came to find a result was at the end of the project, when we noticed that we have 940 different former complete codices. Mm-hmm. We had the remnants of 940 different Quranic codices. Among these were a very few non-Kufic manuscripts.
Yes.
And I remember my my colleague, the restorator, she was waiting for me to give her work. And she said, well, I'm ready to work, and give me something what you think where we should start with. Mm-hmm. I was a bit, bewildered, and I was thinking, what can we give her? And then I told her, okay, take the biggest leaves which you see, mm-hmm. and those with a tumbling script on it.
Yeah.
So, and it turned out at the end that these were the most precious manuscripts, because the biggest ones, first of all, are those in a vertical format.
Yes.
Second, they have no sophisticated layout. That means there is no broad fringe around the script, no broad margin, and, which is more important, usually the one side of the leaf has another number of lines than the rear side, the reverse side. So this is, in Nuce, the description of Hijazi manuscripts. And these are, it's easily to see. You don't need a dating facility for that. It's easily seen to be pre-Kufic. And, well, we call the script Hijazi, which doesn't necessarily mean that it was written in the Hijaz, but we just call it Hijazi because we call the other scripts Kufic, although we know that they were not written in Kufa, nor not necessarily the Kufic script was invented in Kufa or something like that.
They're just traditional designations.
Traditional names for this, and of course...
Ibn Nadim meant is, of course, unclear.
Yes, yes. He doesn't specify, except in one case when he says, well, the Meccans wrote it like this and like that. So this is a tradition, but we have to distinguish between the tradition and the facts which we see. So we did not come to Yemen as Quran experts. We came to Yemen to be curious and to look at the manuscripts themselves without looking very much at the tradition. So we started from a different point of view. If you compare the way of working with the traditional Muslim work, you know the so-called Cairo Quran, which in a way is our standard text now. This text was produced without looking at any manuscript.
Yes.
And they say so even, that they just were keen to use the traditional reports on the text of the manuscripts, and even in Oriental studies. Until recently, it was not fashionable to look at manuscripts. Even a famous Professor Diem, he wrote the first comprehensive articles on Quranic orthography. He says in his what is it, foreword, in his introduction, in his preface, that of course he did not look at manuscripts for writing on Arabic orthography. So this is amazing. If you look at that from today, today the Muslims themselves have become interested in looking at manuscripts. We could talk about that at a different future episode. Yeah, yes. But well, so just to start again where I started, that well, the most important things were really these Hijazi manuscripts, and the restaurator, she could just pick out of the masses of sheet exactly these manuscripts with a different number of lines and vertical format and so on.
Which were paleographically speaking quite distinct.
Yes, very, yeah. And all the other, well, say 95% were more or less nicely written Kufic manuscripts.
Yes.
So, in a way, they were later. Of course, not one of these sheets had a date on it.
No.
So we can just gauge their age by putting a hand on it. Say this is 7th century, this is early 8th century.
There's no imperial criteria for.
No. You can just.
But also because, I mean, we know that Hijazi and Kufi were used contemporaneously.
At the same time, yes.
Yes, it's,
and we know exactly, for instance, that there are very prominent inscriptions in buildings in wonderful Kufic script at a very early age. But at the same time, we read in the traditional reports that the writers of Qurans were reluctant to use this beautiful Kufic script. At a very first stage, we had already identified these most important manuscripts. Of course, we didn't know until the last day, until the last bag to empty, whether there would be another sheet of this kind in it. You see, that's why it was impossible to make a photographic report on the whole thing.
yes.
It could, the microfilming could only be made after the project was finished.
Yes.
After the last of these bags had been flattened and cleaned and determined according to surah and verse and replaced into to the place where it belonged according to the codex.
Okay, with the so after you'd finished the restoration or provisional restoration and determined using the concordance, I assume, where they belong to within the text of the Quran itself, you then photographed these.
Well, this was not my work. The photographic service came with my successor, Graf von Bodmer, because as long as I was there, the restoration of the parchment had not yet finished. You can imagine that there were so many parchment leaves of a kind of middle quality, or say commercial quality, which are, as it was clear to the one who compares it with the Cairo text and so on, these commercial qualities did not really be of historical worth.
Yes.
Well, they are nice to have, but I don't think that they are of more than archaeological importance.
So historical interest as,
yes, as
evidence of transmission history.
Yes, yeah. So in fact, there are only from the whole find in Sana'a, there may be 5%, even less, of historical interest for the history of the Quran text.
So what you're saying, grosso modo, is that the Kufic texts are of less
yes, in a way,
codicological significance and shed less light on the development of the Quranic text.
Except for one or two. Mm-hmm. It was an amazing experience for me to see that on very huge mushaf pages, mm-hmm. There were drawings in color.
Yes.
So that I became very excited because I did not know of any Quran with any drawings in it. Mm. And these were evidently extremely early, but written in a wonderful Kufic and with wonderful surah dividers between surahs, mm-hmm. written, well painted in colors, wonderfully exact drawings and so on. So I was really stunned by that, and I immediately reported it to my friend Graf Bodmer. Here, he also happened to be in Saarland University, but as an art historian, yes. specializing in in Islamic book art.
Yes, illuminations.
In illuminations, yes. And I remember that within 4 weeks, he was in Sana'a. He left everything in Saarbrücken, a wife and his 4 children, and just mounted the airplane, came to Sana'a and looked at this manuscript, and he wrote about that, and it turned out, as according to him, to be a manuscript which can be dated according to art historian criteria into the reign of the Caliph Al-Walid I.
Yes.
So who reigned from 705 to 715.
The successor, the son and successor of Abdul Malik. Yeah.
Yes, and this. The drawings in it, as I just quote my friend von Bodmer, these drawings depict the mosque croquis which Al-Walid built in Medina. Mm. That's the one kind of a mosque, and the other one represents the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. I can't repeat all his arguments with that, but of course that was a very, I think that's in a way the most important manuscripts there. Also for another reason, because it contains the Fatiha and it contains the last 2 surahs.
113, 114. Yeah.
Yes, and this is very astonishing because most of of the central part of this codex is lost.
Yes.
So it is just the few leaves from the beginning and from the end, which were closely tied to the cover of this book.
Yeah.
These are preserved, but unfortunately the rest
Is perished.
has perished. Yes, and one other important discovery is not by me but by von Bodmer, that there is a Yemeni copy of this. It is written in a Kufic, which is not really as nice as the original, which von Bodmer thinks comes from Damascus.
Okay.
And the decoration is also a bit clumsy, but still it's a huge mushaf, and evidently the model was from Damascus, and the imitation
was locally produced.
Was locally produced. Yes. Yeah. So that was really an exciting discovery.
But so good. When we now look there, so we know that the Cairo Quran, has not a historically justified text, nor was it intended to be, and it
not historical, but traditionally, yes.
Tradition, yes, qua tradition, yes.
Yeah.
But it should not be compared with or seen as a critical text, or that uses.
No.
The Kufic texts, how do they compare vis-a-vis the Cairo Quran?
What?
Generally speaking.
Well, generally speaking, there is hardly any difference between the rasm of both. Well, what is it? The rasm is the kind of skeleton.
Yes, the consonantal
script,
skeleton.
The consonantal skeleton script. So, the Cairo Quran is a very traditional version of the rasm. And this rasm very closely corresponds with the rasm of the Kufic Qurans, also found in
which are later, as you said, and probably attest to a period once the text had been stabilized.
Yes,
and this does not apply to the Hijazi texts.
No.
So, which are older and they're
they are, at least we can say they are genetically older.
Yes.
Yeah. If not,
the stemma from which they were copied, at least.
Yeah.
Does not presuppose the same Vorlage as the
exactly.
texts.
Yes. Yeah.
And good. So a point, just to raise a brief point that you touched upon, with the 940 codices, masahaf, that were found, were any complete masahaf found?
No. That was the reason for depositing. These are fragments.
But can one say then that we have that these were once complete Qurans, or does that is clear?
Yes, I myself, I don't have any doubt that these were complete.
And what are besides the rasm, what are the major differences with the traditional standard text of the Quran?
Well, first of all, we must say that the Cairo Quran, the orthography of the Cairo Quran is very old-fashioned.
Yes.
It's very old-fashioned, as compared with the Iranian Qurans, or as compared with Ottoman Qurans, even today.
Yes.
So you have, I have Ottoman Qurans from the 19th century. Their orthography is much more modern as are the as the Cairo Quran. To say one example, in the Cairo Quran, you say ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ.
Yes.
Kitab is always written defectively. It is written like kutub.
Yes.
Yeah, also kaf, ta, ba, colors. And the alif is the dagger alif inserted afterwards. You have to pronounce it kitab, not kutub.
Yes.
So the Rasm says kutub, defective. And so are the Kufi Qurans, and so is the Cairo Quran, and now the Medina Quran is also like that.
Yes.
So these are very traditional. But the Ottoman Qurans, they write as they hear, as they should write,
Yes.
which is called imla'i in Arabic. They write it with an alif, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ. And so do the Persians until now. But the Africans in Timbuktu, they write kutub.
Okay.
They write defectively. They're very traditional. And the Indians, very traditional. They write kutub. It's amazing. So there are two regions where the modern writing was practiced.
So
this is Ottoman and Iran. And that was why in the rising Arabian nationalism at the end of the 19th century, the Egyptian, that's my theory, felt a bit uncomfortable with those many lithographic Qurans coming from Istanbul.
Yes.
So that they said, we must find the original writing. That was the invention of the Rasm Uthmani.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then they took the old orthography for their prints, but they made heavily use of those, say, Masoretic signs like the dagger alif and the madda and all those devices.
So as to create a homogeneous text.
Exactly, yes.
In our next episode, we will pursue this matter further, also with regarding to the significance of especially the Hijazi finds at Sana'a for our understanding of the history of the text of the Quran. Thank you very much.